Hi, my name is Henry, and this is my presentation on Buddhism. So what is Buddhism? Buddhism is the fourth largest religion in the world. It was founded around 2500 years ago by Siddhartha Gautama, the Buddha, in northeast India, and it's one of the oldest and most influential religions in the world. Today, Buddhism has spread to nearly every region of the world. So, the three major schools of Buddhism. Approximately 500 million Buddhists are in the world, and most belong to one of the three major schools, which is Theravada, which takes up Southeast Asia and Sri Lanka, Dharmaguptaka, which takes up China, Korea, and Japan, and Mulasarvastivada, which takes up Tibet, Mongolia, and northern India. And the followers of these schools also may follow different doctrines. So this is a short 3-minute video that gives an introduction and slight overview to Buddhism.
Buddhism is the fourth largest religion in the world, and it is also a transnational religion, meaning that we find Buddhists in every country in the world, and there are a number of countries in the world that are majority Buddhist. Most Buddhists would think of themselves as belonging to one of three schools of Buddhism: Theravada Buddhism, which we find in South and Southeast Asia; Mahayana Buddhism, which we find in East Asia; and Vajrayana Buddhism, which we find in Tibet and Mongolia. Buddhism really starts with the story of Prince Siddhartha, who was born in present-day Nepal 2,500 years ago. And when he was born, a great sage came down from the mountain and told his father, the king, that your son will either be a great emperor or a great spiritual teacher. The king was determined that his son would become a great emperor, so he vowed to shield his son from the suffering and misery of the world and kept him inside the palace walls, where he lived a life of luxury and hedonism. But when Prince Siddhartha was 30 years old, he snuck outside the palace walls and saw for the first time human suffering, and he vowed not to return to the palace until he had solved the problem of human suffering. Over the next 6 years, he spent wandering through forests in India looking for truth until he finally came across a tree in northern India, and he vowed to sit under that tree in meditation until he became enlightened. 49 days later, he became enlightened, and he was known as the Buddha, which in Sanskrit means the one who has awakened. Buddhism is different than the other major world religious traditions because it is not oriented around God, but oriented around man. And what Buddha taught is that we create our own suffering, and the path out of suffering lies with us. We can alleviate suffering by changing our perception of ourselves and our world. Buddha taught that we suffer because we crave, because we're focused on ego, and because we assume things are permanent when they're actually impermanent. And for Buddha, the way not to suffer is to recognize that everything is impermanent, even ourselves, and to recognize the transitory nature of all things. And once we do that, then we can achieve nirvana. Buddhists believe that we're already enlightened Buddhas, and we just have to realize that ourselves. And for Buddhists, because the focus isn't on God, we can transform ourselves to become enlightened. We can understand the world in a particular way where we see the truth of our own natures. And in that respect, Buddhism is a self-empowering religion that many people gravitate towards because it doesn't necessitate that they worship any particular deity or engage in any other type of ritual other than meditation, contemplation, and introspection.
Hi YouTubers! I'm excited.
So who is the Buddha? Well, the Buddha's name is Siddhartha Gautama. He lived in northeast India from around 480 to 400 BCE. He was the son of a local ruler, but pretty much abandoned a life of riches to understand and find a method of overcoming suffering. He also became enlightened after a session of meditation at a tree called the Bodhi tree, and soon afterwards, followers began to gather around him and was eager to get his insight. So, the Four Noble Truths. So the doctrine of Buddhism is based on the Four Noble Truths. And the first truth is the truth of suffering, which is basically that in life there are a lot of suffering. Examples are things like birth, death, sickness, old age, grief, disappointed, sad, angry, etc. And the second truth is the truth of arising, which is our thirst or craving, which we have, and it can lead to suffering. Examples would be wanting something and not getting it, which would cause us disappointment, anger, or sadness, etc. The third truth is the truth of cessation, which is the possibility that withdrawing, renouncing, rejecting, liberating from that craving or thirst that we have that causes suffering. The fourth truth is the truth of path to cessation of suffering, which is the path that will lead us to the end of suffering. So karma and samsara. So karma is a concept shared with Hinduism. It plays an important role in Buddhist religious thought, and it also determines the quality of each rebirth and keeps individual in samsara, which is the cycle of rebirth and death. So pretty much on a basic level, it's just a natural law of cause and effect. So good acts would lead to good results, which is positive karma, while bad acts lead to bad results, which is negative karma. And these individuals are then reborn in good or bad realms based off of their cumulative karma in their lifetime. So the doctrine of impermanence. So it's rooted in the Four Noble Truths, and basically all beings are in a fundamental state of flux and ultimately decay. The world is also in constantly evolving, decaying, and reforming, and Buddhists pretty much saw that people grasped onto things that were impermanent, such as life, love, material objects, etc. And this caused Siddhartha, the Buddha, to abandon his life in the palace to seek out how to overcome suffering. So pretty much since the world is always changing and it's never permanent, people's Buddha saw that people kept grasping onto things that aren't gonna last, so that pretty much caused him to abandon his life and to seek out how to overcome suffering, because people who grasp into things that are impermanent will end up suffering as a result of their thirst or greed. So the doctrine of no self. It was said to be frequently misunderstood in the West a lot, and it's basically that everything in the world is impermanent, so there can't be a permanent self. And it was believed that karma residue is the only thing that is reborn through samsara when we die. And Buddha says that what a person thinks of themselves is just a collection of personality traits. So basically, since our world is impermanent, there can't be a permanent self. So since we're always evolving and changing over time, there isn't a solid state of ourselves that is transferred when we die. And it's only believed that the karma residue, which is the either good or bad thing that you do, will transfer through your next life. So that's the only thing that transfers and determines your next life. So the rite of passage for Buddhists and monks. So most fundamental rite of passage for a Buddhist is just to recourse to three refuges, which are I go to for refuge to the Buddha, I go for refuge to the Dharma, and I go to refuge to the Sangha. In the ritual, confirmation for intent of living as a Buddhist and is the minimal commitment. And for monks, the above is just a first step, and they must also do some extra things, such as sever ties with domestic life, a ritual of renunciation called leaving home for homelessness, and after that, there are also vows that they have to do. So, if you've seen monks before, they've pretty much live a different life than I would say the average person would, and that's because they pretty much sever ties with domestic life. So, in conclusion, Buddhism differs from other religions and faith, and it focuses on achieving a state of enlightenment through overcoming suffering and doing good deeds rather than a connection between humanity and God like many other religions. So basically, Buddhism is a religion about self-empowering and self-improvement. It focuses on living your life through not suffering and doing positive and good things, rather than other religions which are more focused on the relationship between humanity and God. So these are my sources that I use to create this PowerPoint and presentation. Thank you everyone for listening,